Hi guys, Kim here at Olive City Homestead. It's the middle of September 2021 and I've got blue skies again finally. The smoke has cleared from the surrounding wildfires, at least for this week, and the temperatures have dropped by about 15-20 degrees Fahrenheit. So we are down in the low 90s, which I am super much enjoying. Fall starts in just about 2 weeks. Actually, fall starts on my birthday. My birthday's on the autumn equinox. So hey, how do you like my shirt? Can you see it all? It's got like all these different flowers on it. I really like it. So way back at the beginning of May, Eva from DIY and Company, great YouTube channel. You definitely need to check it out, by the way. She's got just such interesting stuff. She's in the Netherlands, Eva is, and she does antique kind of thrifting videos. She does gardening videos. She does amazing do-it-yourself videos. She's just phenomenal with woodworking and decorating. I just can't tell you how amusing and fun and entertaining and practical her channel is. So go check it out and I will put the link in the description below. Anyway, she tagged me in a video. Yes, back at the first week of May, and it is finally now in the middle of September when I'm getting around to doing it. Sorry, Eva. And it was a video about 9 gardening questions and getting to know me better through me answering those questions. So here we go. All right, question number 1 is, did you have a garden growing up? No, not really. That's interesting. My mother never gardened. My dad, though, was a landscaper, a private landscaper. So I grew up with lots of plants in every backyard that we had. We always rented. We were definitely lower middle income. We always rented a little house, and our backyard would be absolutely crammed with 15-gallon, 5-gallon, and 1-gallon pots. And I knew exactly what all those sizes were because I was often watering them. And those were for his jobs. And he would go out, you know, and bid on them, and he would draw up the plans. I was always fascinated because he'd have these big sketch pads that he would use all these rulers and intricate math to lay out and draw, and then colored pencils to fill in his plans for the gardens that he was designing for these very rich people. I sometimes would go with him, very rarely, but occasionally, and it was obviously momentous enough that I remember to these people's houses, and I would be like just like blown away by how rich they were, and that my dad was designing their garden, and then I'd see at the end how gorgeous it was. Yeah, I was always super impressed by that because my dad was very upfront about, he didn't really read well at all. He was not a book smart type person. He barely got through high school. He and my mom used to talk a lot about how they were high school sweethearts and she did his homework for him. That's how he graduated. Yeah, anyway, so I was always really impressed with his designs, and it showed me that there's more than one way to be smart, that's for sure. So yes, we had lots of plants in the backyard. There were certain varieties I knew quite well, juniper being one. But it wasn't until I was in high school, actually the year before I went to college, that we bought a house with a little bit of property, and my dad planted the first vegetable garden ever. And we got chickens and goats and a little pony. And I thought, wow, this would have been great if I had it when I was growing up. But I left a year later. But I guess it did leave an impression on me because eventually that's sort of what I ended up with. Years later, when I returned, you know, after college, after being married, after having a few kids, after living overseas in China and Hong Kong for 4 or 5 years, and I resettled in California near my family, then my parents had moved and they had quite a lot of acreage, and they did have a little veggie garden. My dad, though, not my mom. And there were never really any flowers, ever. My mom just didn't do flowers. That wasn't her thing. I mean, I think she enjoyed flowers. And in her last years before she died, she became the purple lady, and so she loved purple flowers. And I actually have segments in my garden that are definitely in honor of her, all the purple stuff. But my dad did love trees, and so I definitely got my love of fruit trees from my dad. I remember when I was about 8, one of the houses we rented for a year had 5 fruit trees in the backyard. And the one in the middle was a fig tree. And I'd never heard of figs before. Certainly never eaten one. The closest I'd ever come to a fig was a Fig Newton cookie. But I can just like almost re-experience what it was like to go in the backyard and take figs off the tree, break them open, and eat them right out of their skin. And it was incredibly not only delicious, but just a unique experience for a kid like me who had very limited food experience. I love the fact that I could go in the backyard and have plums or apples or figs just by pulling them off the tree. And that, I think, stuck with me. Even though we moved a year later and they did not have fruit trees again until, after I was married, gone, and had kids and came back to see, then they had lots of fruit trees. It stuck with me, and I think that's why I have a fruit orchard today. But as far as gardening goes, no, I did not grow up with a garden. I never saw a garden until my senior year in high school in my backyard. Okay, question number 2. Where was my first garden and what did I grow? All right, my first garden was when I was 30 years old. I had just come back and settled here after living in China and teaching English there for several years. Yeah, I had 5 little children. My youngest was a baby that spring of '96, and my oldest was 8 and a half. And I planted my first garden. We were renting a house with a really big backyard, and I got out there and I dug up by hand the lawn. It was Bermuda grass. Now that I've experienced Bermuda grass here again over the last 8 years, I'm really impressed with my 30-year-old self because I really can't imagine doing that now. But I did. I dug up half of the backyard. My neighbor who lived behind me saw me. He was over on his side. It was a cyclone fence so he could see. And he was rototilling up his backyard for a garden. And I guess he took pity on me because when I was about halfway done, he drove that rototiller down the road to me and said, "Can I finish that for you?" I was like, okay. That was nice. Anyway, I planted that garden, and that was glorious, really. I have some pictures of my kids then standing in my garden that summer. We all enjoyed it so much. I'm going to stick those pictures in now so you can see. Yeah, so I grew, just the basics, the stuff we enjoyed eating. Zucchini and yellow squash, lots of corn, lots of tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, strawberries, watermelon. The basics, the stuff that was easy to grow. Nothing exotic, nothing unique, but we loved it. And I'll tell you 2 stories from that year. One was that I had a big party for my extended family at that time. I, served dinner and everything. And one of the things I served was corn on the cob out of the garden. My dad and I, we don't have a bad relationship, but we just never really connected that well because I was really into reading and school and all the stuff he wasn't into. And so he was impressed that I could grow this and that it tasted so good. And that really meant a lot to me. And then actually I have 2 more stories. One of the stories was one day I looked outside in the corner of my garden where I was growing my tomatoes, and right in front of my eyes I saw a tomato plant that was like 4 feet tall get sucked down under the ground in about 2 seconds flat or less. It just was, and it disappeared. And I was like, what just happened? At that time, I had no experience with gophers or any other kind of rodents or pests there might be. So I didn't even realize that was a possibility. It seemed totally surreal, totally impossible, and it took me a while to figure out what had happened. Another story from that summer was my, 3-year-old at that time started screaming one morning from the playroom, which looked out on the backyard. And she was screaming about one of our cats being attacked. And she was screaming, "There's a worm in the backyard and he's eating Princess!" So Princess was our cat. And I'm hearing this, that there's a worm eating Princess. And I was like, what? And I run to the sliding door and look out. And actually it was, okay, so no cat was harmed at this time. Okay, my daughter was just scared. But there was a snake near one of our cats. And it was a king snake, as I later found out. It was a huge king snake, which is actually a very good snake to have. But I didn't know anything about snakes at the time. And it was big, and it was near a cat. It wasn't really going after the cat in any way, but it scared my daughter. And it's just one of those things that particular thing she yelled has been passed down through the ages. She is now, how old is she now? Wait a minute, 87, 89, 91, 93, 93. Okay, so she's 28 now. And it's still passed around in the family, her scream, "A worm is eating Princess!" Anyway, that was a fabulous garden. It was the first garden I ever grew. It was immensely successful, other than an occasional gopher sucking down a tomato plant. I did have some tomatoes growing in pots as opposed to in the ground along the fence line. And I remember those ones got some tomato hornworms, and I would pay my oldest son, who was 7 at the time, to go out and take them off, because there was no way in the world I was going to take them off. And actually, I still wouldn't take them off. But I haven't seen any tomato hornworms in my current garden. The only time I've ever seen them is in that one garden that one year. Because yes, I moved the next year, and I didn't have another garden from the time I was 30 until I moved here 8 years ago. And I was a lot older than 30 then. Okay, question number 3. Who taught me to garden? No one. I gardened myself that first year just based on what was written on the back of the seed packs. And it worked great. Mostly probably because I'm living Northern California, which is the perfect spot to grow those types of normal summer veggies. And then after that, I didn't have another garden until I came here. And when I came here, so many years later, we had the internet and YouTube. And that's where I learned to garden. I planted my first veggies 6 years ago, and my first fruit trees 4.5 years ago. And I would say I learned mostly from firsthand experience, trial and error, but I did get very definite tips and ideas of things to experiment with from YouTube. And the first gardening channel that I clicked with that really gave me the freedom to just do it the way I wanted to do it and not be intimidated by all the professional type gardeners that were out there, because there's a lot of those. And while I might appreciate and enjoy seeing their gardens, I also know I don't have the money, the time, or the know-how to do what they're doing. So this woman was Robbie from Robbie and Gary Easy Gardening. And she just made things seem so simple and so fun. And she was like just this down-to-earth person who grew what she wanted to grow for eating. And that's how I wanted to start. And so she really gave me the permission really to just do it my way. And the idea to also use containers, totes, as well as planting in the ground. And the other YouTube channels that helped me early on were those that had a focus on permaculture and food forests, because I did want to grow from the very beginning. I was focused on growing a lot of perennials. Yes, of course, fruit trees and nut trees, but also perennials in the form of veggies and flowers. And so I did enjoy and learn a lot from a variety of YouTube channels that focused on those things. But really, mostly, I have to say that in the last 6 years of veggie gardening and 4.5 years of fruit orchard gardening, most knowledge and success has come from error and then change and relearning and experimenting and having fun with the garden, not being afraid to experiment. Yeah. Question number 4, why do I garden? I garden because it's fun. That's the main reason. I talk about nature therapy because I totally believe in it. I do a lot of hiking. I do a lot of sitting with a glass of iced tea or a glass of wine or a cup of coffee in my gardens or my orchards, and I soak in nature, and it makes me feel better. It gives me energy, it relaxes me, it calms me down, it inspires me. I totally believe in nature therapy, both just immersing myself in nature and taking nature in. So I grow a lot of things that I believe have medicinal as well as nutritional value. I drink a lot of tea that I make from a variety of the fruits and leaves I grow. And yeah, I garden because gardening makes my life so much better. Yes, it's a form of exercise too. And I used to run and I loved it. It was also, in addition to being physically great, it was mentally and emotionally great for me. But arthritis and neck issues, severe neck issues that I have, put an end to that pretty much. Lately, I've been trying to get back to it again, walking/running. But in its place, gardening, spending hours every day outside in nature and working in it has really helped me in the same way. It's given me that same mental and emotional energy and time frame to center myself, as well as the physical workout. So yeah, I enjoy gardening so much. And there is that aspect that I absolutely love of learning so many new things constantly. There's always room to learn and grow and experiment with gardening, and it's always a challenge. And hey, it's also very delicious too. Okay, question number 5 is a quick and easy one. It's, when did I plant my current garden? Well, every spring I plant a new annual veggie garden, and then I plant a new one in the summer and a new one in the fall. Yeah, so I have a spring, summer, and fall kind of series of crops that are annual veggies. And I started that 6 years ago. And when I first started, I just had like 2 beds and a couple of pots. And every year I've added more. So now it's a lot bigger than it was 6 years ago. And then my fruit and nut orchard, I started 4.5 years ago. And I put the bulk of my trees in that first year. And then each year since then, I have added more. And now I have 80 plus. I just added some new ones recently, and I was so excited because actually my last video, because they're just super interesting, kind of, not, I wouldn't say rare, but unusual fruit trees. And I'm really, really excited to see how they do. But really, perennial gardening has always been my focus. And in the last few months, I have been sort of refocusing on it. As in, I've realized that my annual veggie garden perhaps has gotten just past too big. And I want to cut back a little bit on it next spring, not plant as many new annuals. Because, well, my kids are leaving home. I only have 2 minor kids left at home. Oh, wait. Oh, my daughter, who's a senior, is not a minor anymore. She just turned 18. Well, anyway, I have 2 kids in high school still at home. So I really don't need this huge garden, even though I have fun with it. But I'm going to cut it back, and I want to grow more perennials, because my perennials, whether they're veggies or fruit trees and nut trees or my flowers, my herb garden, they require so much less care than annuals. Annuals by far take the most care of any plant that I grow, so I want to grow less and less of them. I mean, there always will be a place for them, but perennials are the focus and goal of my gardening life, and I want that to be more and more the case as time goes on. Question number 6 is, how do I decide what I'm going to garden? Well, that's pretty much twofold. One is, what do we enjoy eating? Because I have definitely learned it doesn't pay off to grow things that we're not going to eat. I mean, there are exceptions to that. We don't really eat much of the collards, but that makes fabulous compost tea that feeds all the other plants. So that's okay. But in general, like, I have some great eggplants growing this summer, but nobody in my family eats eggplants. So I'm like, why am I growing those? They're pretty. I love their purple shininess, but nobody eats them. My chickens will probably eat them, but yeah. The other main factor is I love to experiment. I love to try new things because you never know what you're going to enjoy, both aesthetically and gastronomically, what you're going to enjoy eating, what you're going to enjoy just experiencing, the pleasure of it. And that's another big thing when it comes to what I decide to grow. I guess there's a third element, and that's just what is practical. So say in my fruit orchard, I definitely need to decide ways to increase production. For instance, I'm going to get some crab apples this year, some bare root crab apples to plant. Or I might get potted ones. But anyway, over the winter, early spring, I'm going to plant some crab apple trees, because those will definitely increase pollination for all my apple trees. Plus, they're beautiful. So I'm definitely looking into both the color of their blossoms, the color of their fruit, and the color of their fall foliage. And I'm also looking into the taste of their fruit itself, because you can make some fabulous jam from crab apples. Did you know that? Because they're super high in pectin. So yeah. And as far as flowers go, I grow 90 to 95% perennial flowers. I grow very few annuals. I mean, I can't even think of any annuals. I'm sure there's one or two, but for one thing, in this climate, in Zone 9B, things that are annuals everywhere else usually end up being perennial here. So then I have to look at which of these perennial flowers thrive, which are the most hardy, which do I need to give the least attention, which look the best through the hot, dry summer days that we get here. Those are the ones I want to grow. So I have learned to say, yeah, you didn't do so well. I'm not planting you next year. You're out. You're in. Because I want a garden, a flower garden that I can really enjoy, both for the color of the flowers and the leaves, and aromas, and just the sheer beauty of it all, that I don't have to work my tail off to keep alive. I'm not into that. They need to prove themselves that they like it here. And if they do, if they like it here and they can grow well here and they can look beautiful here in their own way, then they have a home here. And then the other thing I always choose to grow, and that each year I plan a little more, what else can I expand to in this area, is in my herb garden, because I grow a lot of plants for their medicinal value, whether that be in drinking teas or in using in my cooking. So I'm always researching more as to what plants I can add to my garden in those respects. All right, question number 7. Which plants this year brought me the most joy? Well, I have to say that the ground cherries that grew out of the bottom of one of my 15-gallon containers through one of the drain holes, they definitely amuse me the most. And the tomatillas that came up as a volunteer in the middle of nowhere in my backyard, that it took me a while to recognize what they even were, they definitely surprised me the most, and I let them keep growing even though there was only one plant, and they say you need 2. They are now producing fruit, so yeah, they definitely are the surprise of the season. Now, the plants that have impressed me the most are definitely the zucchini plants, because oh my goodness, the squirrels have attacked those plants probably 5 or 6 times and eaten them down to bare nubs, and yet The zucchini plants have grown back again and again and again with the aid of some tool. And now they've produced so many zucchinis it's as if they were never attacked at all. I've had a lot of fun propagating new plants this year from cuttings and from seeds. My rhubarb plants have been quite an accomplishment for me this year because I have tried growing them in past years and not succeeded. So this year I experimented with putting them in all different places and found that they actually do grow well here and produce well here if I put them in a spot where they get quite a bit of filtered sun, where they're in partial shade and partial sun throughout the day. So I'm really happy about that because I love a good strawberry rhubarb pie. And then the flower I've enjoyed the most this year is definitely zinnias. I have purple print zinnias that just took off growing this year, and they're still going strong, and the color is absolutely amazing, and they're just being prolific, and I'm certainly going to plant a lot more zinnias of this large variety in the coming years. And question number 8 is, what gardening tool do I find essential? And to be honest, the only one I absolutely must have is pruning shears, because I have such a big fruit orchard and you do need to prune your fruit trees regularly. I must have pruning shears. I guess next on the list would be a shovel for planting new trees and maybe a hose, if you consider that a tool, because I do need to water. But other than that, my hands work for most everything. Question number 9, the last question, is what are the elements I see in my dream garden? And you know, I have a lot of what I want already. I just want to develop it more. But if I could have anything I wanted, I would eliminate all Bermuda grass. I would add more water features, bird baths and such, fountains and the sound of running water, which would draw in the birds. I would love that. An easier, more consistent access to wood chips for mulch. I already use them and they're fabulous, but I would love to have them just like regularly brought in. All of this leading to the gorgeous, practical permaculture garden that is the ultimate in beauty and nature therapy. That's what I'm going for, and whether I do that here or somewhere else, I will do it because that's my dream. And you can create the life that you want and that you dream of, no matter what anyone else ever says to you. So don't forget that. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. See you next time, folks. Right, Toffee? Toffee, turn around for the camera. Toffee. Toffee. No, Toffee won't turn around for the camera. Isn't that a gorgeous sunset through the olive trees? Just beautiful.